Today we'll dive deep into answering this burning question on everyone's mind. Is Canada making it harder for international students to study here? 2024 has been a whirlwind for international students. Like, never before have we seen such a flurry of updates, policy changes, and even media releases all focused on the international student program. If you've been following the news, or perhaps following this channel, if you know what I mean, you'll know that IRCC has made significant changes for both prospective and current international students in Canada. I've covered some of these changes in a previous video, but brace yourselves because there's more. IRCC is currently discussing 4 major changes to the international student program. And these changes are: 1. Implementing a letter of acceptance or LOA verification system. 2. Requiring DLIs to report on their students. 3. Setting conditions and suspensions for non-complying DLIs. And 4. Requiring students to submit a new study permit if they want to switch DLIs. I'll be breaking these new changes down for you in a moment and explain why Canada is moving towards this direction. At the end of this video, we'll revisit this initial question and explain what led us to our final answer. So let's get into it and see what it all means for you. Before we begin, when I mention DLIs or Designated Learning Institutions and international students, I'm only referring to post-secondary DLIs and also post-secondary international students. So just keep that in mind. With that, let's discuss the first change, which is the implementation of a new LOA or Letter of Acceptance Verification system. This system includes a portal where DLI has to confirm a student's personal information. The main goal of the system is to prevent students or shady student recruitment agents from using fake LOAs or Letters of Acceptance. Now, there have been many cases where agents produce fake LOAs for students who don't know any better. These students somehow get their study permits approved, come to Canada, and then find out that they have to apply to another school. So, with this new LOA verification system, it can easily detect a fake LOA. To support this, IRCC recently shared numbers highlighting the success of its LOA verification process, which was launched in December 2023 to protect students from study permit scams. To date, almost 162,000 LOAs have been reviewed by IRCC, with close to 142,000 validated directly by the DLIs. However, nearly 9,000 LOAs did not match those issued by DLIs, indicating that they were likely fraudulent or had already been cancelled before the student applied for a study permit in Canada. This shows why it's so important to keep verifying LOAs, as it helps prevent scams that rely on fake admission letters to get study permits. It also removes a loophole that allows agents to take advantage of unsuspecting students. Overall, I think this new change is great because it protects genuine students and keeps the integrity of the international student program intact. The second change by IRCC requires designated learning institutions to report on their students. This means DLIs must inform IRCC about whether a student has been accepted into their program, their current status, and if they're actively pursuing their studies. Now, actively pursuing your studies means being a full-time student, making progress towards completing your program, and not taking any unauthorized leave. Now, consider this scenario. If your school reports to IRCC that you are not actively pursuing your studies, it could mean that you are breaching your study permit conditions. IRCC might use this report to issue breaches to these students and potentially asking them to leave Canada. However, I feel this method allows IRCC to obtain a student's personal information indirectly through the school rather than directly from the student. Schools should protect their students' personal information and obtain their consent before sharing it with IRCC. Following this change, I expect a significant increase in the number of students being asked to leave Canada. Overall, I am not in favor of this change due to concerns about protecting students' private information. To navigate this, I think schools may likely make students sign a consent to release information form at the time of their enrollment. Now, if you're a genuine student, you shouldn't be too worried about this. But if you're not, well, now's the time to start taking your studies more seriously. Now, the third change concerns setting conditions and imposing suspensions on designated learning institutions. IRCC may now require DLIs to report on various matters related to their students. These reports can include information on whether the student is in the correct program, their enrollment status, if the student is actively pursuing their studies, or any other information requested by IRCC. If a DLI fails to provide the requested report, IRCC can impose a suspension on the institution for up to 1 year. Yikes. During this suspension period, the DLI will not be permitted to accept new international students. Additionally, the suspended DLI will be placed on a public suspension list, which I like to call the naughty list. And students who are accepted into this suspended DLI will have their study permit applications returned. The potential for a suspension of up to 1 year is massive. I mean, schools will lose revenue if put on the naughty list. To make matters worse, the DLI will also be publicly listed as suspended, which could damage the school's reputation. Overall, I believe this change could lead to some drastic consequences, and I am not in favor of it. The reason I say this is it could push schools to report or even over-report just to safeguard their revenue stream. Now, the last change requires students to submit a new study permit application when transferring to a new DLI. While this may seem logistically stressful at first, don't worry, students can still attend the new DLI while their study permit application is being processed. To understand the change, let's look at it from both the schools and the students' perspectives to get the full picture. From the school side, one reason behind this move is to allow schools to better manage the allocation of letters of acceptance and provincial attestation letters. You see, when students transfer between schools or provinces, it actually complicates the balance of student numbers. So by making the transfer process more stringent, schools can verify and manage these allocations more effectively. Now, from the student side, this change aims to prevent students from gaming the system. You see, some students initially enroll in top schools with high study permit approval rates and then transfer to a cheaper or less prestigious school to save on tuition. Conversely, others start at schools with easier admission requirements and then later transfer to better institutions to obtain a more reputable degree. So by making the transfer process more complicated, the new rule addresses these tactics, ensuring that students commit to their chosen schools. Now, while I like the idea, this change is also a double-edged sword. And that's because genuine students who may want to transfer for legitimate reasons, such as seeking better educational opportunities, will now face more logistical headaches and paperwork. And with that, it'll be sad to see these students burdened by additional hurdles if this change goes through. So I wonder how IRCC plans to maneuver these challenges to balance the integrity of the system while also meeting the needs of genuine students. Overall, I'm 50-50 on this. I think this change is quite burdensome, but I also see why it's necessary. Now let's summarize how I feel about each of the proposed changes. So first, the LOA verification system. Honestly, I'm in favor of it. I think it's a good way to stop students and shady agents from exploiting the system. Second, requiring students to submit a new study permit application when transferring DLIs. I'm 50-50 on this. I still much prefer the old system of notifying IRCC about the change. I mean, some genuine students may be discouraged by the thought of receiving a refusal and might just stay put in a less desired school. Third, requiring DLIs to report on their students. I'm not in favor of this. It's giving police state vibes. Personally, I don't want a school to continuously monitor my attendance, status, or whether I'm taking the required number of classes, and then using that information to potentially ask me to leave Canada. No, I think there's a better way to go about it without the threat of punishment. Finally, imposing suspensions on non-compliant DLIs. Again, I'm not in favor of it. It feels too punitive, and some DLIs might prioritize their revenue over the best interests of their students. With that, let's go back to answer the question, is Canada making it harder for international students to study here? The answer is a resounding yes. Given the previous changes and the proposed new changes, students are now facing more difficulties. I mean, first, they have to navigate the complexities of applying to study in Canada. And secondly, even when they're already here, they are encountering additional hurdles. But is Canada doing this within reason? For me, the answer is both yes and no. Honestly, some of these changes have more to do with control than actually improving the system. Previously, people complained that the system was too lax, allowing anyone to study in Canada. But now, IRCC seems to be swinging to the other extreme with these stringent new measures. I think IRCC's actions appear to be more aligned with the political climate in Canada, where there is a growing sentiment against students due to issues like the housing crisis. So I guess the next follow-up question that you may have in mind is it still worth it to study in Canada? And we've answered that in detail already in another video, but let me sum it up here. The short answer comes down to your intentions. For those who genuinely want to study in Canada, it can still be worthwhile. However, for those looking to use the education route as a pathway to permanent residency, the increased risks and complexities might make it less appealing. So, if you are a genuine student, consider any opportunity for permanent residency as a bonus, not the primary goal. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful and insightful. And I have a question for you guys. For current students in Canada, how do you feel about these changes? And for those of you planning to study here, how do you feel about studying in Canada now? As always, your thoughts are welcomed in the comments. And remember, information is power, so if you found this video valuable, please share it to someone who could benefit from this. Alright guys, thanks for watching, stay safe and be kind, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!